Hello, welcome back. Right now, we are on our last session. So I'm going to say how to organize this town hall meeting. And first of all, Jose will be helping to conduct the Q&A, and I will field questions from chat. And Margie will going to share the screen with us. These are the suggestions from Roundtable. And then, of course, Jose will wanted to see what are the best actionable items because Jose and I were going to talk to Kristen this week. How do we convert, transform all this energy from this group into something that's real change in NSF? Aravind, are you there? Let me see if Aravind is here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so great. Why don't you take 2 or 3 minutes to summarize what do you find on your table?
Sure. My table was about addressing imposter syndrome, where people do not feel that they belong in the certain environments that they're in, and that's primarily fueled by both internal and external factors. So we were discussing in our table both the ways it presents itself and how to address it as researchers ourselves, and how the system should be, meaning the lab and the department, should come in place to help us. So if you scroll down further, the action points that are suggested, the interventions that are suggested. So at the level of institution, there should be peer support network, like weekly luncheons or something, where people are able to share their vulnerabilities. Or this experiment didn't do well, and I'm trying to figure this out. I remember there was also a message board that another group presented recently, which is also helpful in exchange of ideas. And in terms of institutional help, the idea of toxic work culture also came up in trying to understand and ensure that URMs, underrepresented minorities, feel comfortable in a workplace environment. And that was one thing that was discussed. And personal effort, the key thing was to count your positive feedback that you get, document them. And the other thing is to also use the negative criticism as a pivot to improve your own abilities.
Okay, great. The next host is Jules. Let me just tell you that these hosts are volunteers from PoLS, and these are the topics that they come up by themselves that they think is most important to them. So kudos to students. Jules, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, could you please summarize what you're finding on your table?
Sure. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to summarize what we talked about during the roundtable. My name is, again, Jules Belendi Kenyi. On my roundtable, it was question to, we talked about how to promote the minority participation in conferences. And we first, the first question we had was to, how to get those minority in our, in our research before we can promote them to those conferences. Jose has a very good idea. Like we can organize. We can organize seminar. We can organize a talks, student talks, such as the one we have at the CTBP, to encourage a student to have a talk, so that I can prepare them. It can also prepare the student the student connection. And also we talked about how to promote, how to organize the summer workshops, so that it can get a student involved in a STEM field. This way, it will allow those underrepresented students to get involved in a STEM field. We also exchange about how to recruit those students. Like, we should change the way we recruit. So we should change the way we recruit the student. We should be more aggressive. We should go to those students and try to give them the advantages of being in a STEM field. And also, we should not rely only on GPA and and GRE, we should also mostly rely on a student background. So these are the main points we discussed during the roundtable. Thank you.
Thank you, Jules. Next table will be.
I can briefly summarize.
Yeah, you're there. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, there were 4 of us at this table.
Yes, yes.
So the primary thing we discussed at this table was the perception of what one can do with a physics degree. And at least if physics is perceived as something which is not financially lucrative, we are likely to lose out on participation from people very early on in middle schools or high schools. So what can we as the PoLS community do? One of the things we discussed was using the alumni database, not just of PoLS, but of our departments and universities, to go and talk to draw upon these alumni to come and talk to students in schools, community colleges about firstly, what is physics and what can be done with a physics degree that is not just the track to getting a professor's job. And this is especially important if somebody is growing up without seeing any role models in science. So the idea is mainly to provide role models for students at various stages.
Thank you very much, Katob. And the last table was organized by SACNAS.
So SACNAS is the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. And they have a very active group at the University of Houston. I've worked with them in a number of cases for both undergraduate outreach as well as high school outreach. And so partially they were talking about some of the other programs that they've been working on. In particular, activities through the University of Houston's Office of Undergraduate Research to get undergrads more involved in research at the University of Houston. Helping students drafting their CVs and drafting letters to PIs so that they're more prepared to get involved directly in research. And one of the things that I found really interesting, and this was a big problem that we had in the FIS program that was fully online this year, is the difficulty of just not being able to interact with people. And so SACNAS students are very, they join what's called a Discord server to play a very popular video game called Among Us right now. But they spend hours just interacting with each other, talking to each other and feeling some sort of sense of community. And so it's based off of the conversations that they had at the table. I think this is something that was potentially very valuable for giving a sense of community and belonging in science, and also just helping people stay sane. Let's see. Yeah, generally speaking, so SACNAS is managed by graduate students at the University of Houston that were former undergraduates at the University of Houston that were involved in research, and so they can speak very honestly and believably about the research experience and the transition into grad school. So it really is an excellent group at the University of Houston.
Thank you, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
That will be the roundtable from yesterday. And how about the roundtable from today?
Yeah, I can summarize. It was my student is here about research, and I'm at a little school, so we got to talk shop in a minute. I got this thing on. But what we talked about, and it was really interesting because, right, our discussion was initially about how to build these pathways from high school to college, and then college to graduate school and beyond. But what seemed to happen with the group that congregated there, and we really talked about, really focused on having that sense of belonging. And so because that was kind of absent or sort of, I guess what it is, even with myself in physics, if you don't pursue the traditional path in physics, you're not necessarily visualized as continue on to the professoriate, or maybe you don't want to continue on. So what are other options that students can pursue at whatever level they are to still contribute to the field, but not necessarily move towards industry or the professoriate. And so kind of to build either a network or a website or some additional, just to show other options where you're still working in the field, but not necessarily pursuing those traditional avenues of physics.
I see. Yeah. Thank you very much, Tav. The next table will be mentoring for diversity, inclusion, and equity. Is Kate here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Please help summarize items from your table.
Sure. So in terms of thinking about what the PoLS network institutions could do, our roundtable came up with the ideas that as diversity, equity, inclusion, the ideas of all of that has changed over time. And so not only to have training that could be accessed within the PoLS network, but have training that adapts over time. And I don't want to, it's difficult to say that mentor training should be a requirement, because if someone's not receptive to it, right, they're not going to get as much out of it. But to have like a continuing education requirement for people who sign on to the PoLS network's guidelines or the PoLS network's values. So really coming up with training that can be accessed, maybe a set of values or guidelines or recommendations for mentoring. And if this is done at the institution, the multi-institutional level, it wouldn't put so much burden on like each school to come up with their own program, but maybe funding could be shared between the institutions to make mentor training that that allows for the best mentoring at the time, because we're learning constantly how to improve. And a way to assess whether that works is to not only allow not only have an assessment of if it works, but an assessment for each institution to kind of decide or each department to decide on what areas really need to be worked on through a survey, and then have a post program assessment on how those things have worked. So summary is training and feedback, and basically adaptive training over time.
Thank you so much, Kate. That's fantastic. Our next table topic is what to look for in a mentor. Is Ms. Calamer here?
I think she was the only one at that table. I was there for the luncheon, but she put some nice notes here, and she's a fourth year PhD at the moment. And I think one of the things she emphasized for herself, that your own advisor may not be the mentor that you need. And so to look for mentors also outside, and for your maybe personal support. And so she put some notes in here, the things that she had brought up. So mentors and advisors are not necessarily synonymous. I can't change this myself. And she feels like she found a good mentor. I don't exactly, it was one of the grad students, I think, right now. You see, so relationships can't be forced. And I guess I can't see the rest of these. Can someone move this? That some of the mentors really didn't seem to have an interest in being a mentor, but they were chosen for some of the students. And she's mentoring some other grad students that are doing it, and she felt that taught her a lot about it.
Oh, thank you very much for the insight. I think the last table is also SAGNES. Greg, I think the students are not here.
It was largely a similar discussion today. So essentially, today they had new undergraduates that were joining, and so they essentially had a small meeting for SAGNES to describe how they can help these undergrads. So, but largely the stories were very similar.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the hosts, PoLS stakeholders, for the thoughtful summary. I think we can unshare the screen by Marty. And Jose, would you like to lead some discussions, and I can field the questions from chat?
Okay, I will try to say a few things that appear to be important for me as some actual items we can do for polls, as polls becoming active right now. So one of the main topics that come is a better integration between polls. Particularly, we all have programs training undergrads. How can we create a resource with all the name of these undergrads that come from underrepresented groups and publicize for every polls node as these kids apply to graduate school and things like that. So we can also get the students that come in our undergrad training programs and use that as a resource for graduate school. And I think we can use, and since we have an agreement, we can sort of work on getting these kids into graduate school, and we have going to have a pool of underrepresented parts and really try to push this pipeline as strong as we can. On the second regard, there's the idea of how can we have people that are recruited by some groups by different ways, but they may have mentoring in other institutions that we have to bring up. The third topic, I think, is how can we include high school teachers maybe into the PoLS network, both into the conference and maybe doing some research during the summer, and how can we support for that? If I come now to the discussion of the tables, there's a big discussion about career path. Just out of curiosity, I think that it's interesting to see the APS had some studies I saw many years ago. Actually, the average salary of a physicist is much higher than the average salary of an engineer. And so it's an interesting thing what you with a degree of physics can do, not only as a physicist, but in other areas, just because of the training that you have. I think there was the question about mentoring that I think has been raised here very carefully, the difference between advising and mentoring, or have multiple people being on the questions of mentoring. I think there is the sense of belonging and the need of, I think Charlie said about anti-racism. I just want to put a personal plug in here. Before I came to RISE, I used to run the Faculty Equity Committee at UCSD. And now things are much better, but 12, 13 years ago, we were starting to really be proactive on this area. And when you ask every department how they did, they always said, oh, our criteria is excellence. So I decided to do a poll, to do a survey from our faculty, say, okay, since your definition is excellence, why don't you define for me what excellence is? And I need less to say which kind of answers we get in terms of most of them. If you look like me, if you work on what I do, preferentially you had the same advisor. So anyway, so it's a very interesting question that comes to the topic what people said about I think there was a comment about people need to be retrained on what training and mentoring is on the new thing. I think there's a topic of discussion. We may want to go back to that discussion. And finally, I think there is the sense of belonging. That's something we have been working on it, but and I think that really get related to the fact people have now about systemic racism and what people say, a situation where you just don't feel comfortable, right? And that really exclude people from the process because you cannot really bring a level of comfort for them. These are things on my notes, but I would like to see what other people have to say as we come along.
Yeah, I think because we only have, let's see, without fielding questions, do we have anybody talking over one another? Anybody want to talk? I do feel like for some faculty from minority serving institutions, they wish to be involved in a grant other than just passing emails along. I think that the message there is that they have to get paid like researchers or something because they really need some time to be involved in research to help the students that is non-summer times. I thought this is something that actionable plans, some PIs from PWI can do.
And also, yeah, like you said, Margaret, the being involved also in the research. So maybe even if they're not being directly paid, but they're being incorporated into these research collaborations, not just sort of signing over their students. the PWI.
Yeah, I think I actually have the privilege to talk to every single speakers one-on-one and talk in depth about what they feel about it. I think one of the issues that they wouldn't want it just to be a stamp person who just signed the collaborator letter and suggest the name of students, because that will get them NSF grants. They also want to be involved.
So I would like to ask a question for the young people that's still present here. I came with a list of topics. Would you guys to add other topics to the list, or you like to elaborate on some of them? It would be great to hear from the young people, because sometimes when we are trying to make decisions, when we're a group of polls trying to make, we can get great ideas from you. So someone want to comment on it, Base? Come on.
Yes, I want to talk. Yes, I want to.
Jules, okay, yeah.
Yes. Hi, I want to comment a little bit about the recruitment process. So how can we recruit those students, those underrepresented minority students? Usually, it's like they like to see something that looks like them. During the recruitment process, Jose talked. So he talked about going to those institutions like TSU to talk to those students. I think going to those institutions with somebody that looks like them, somebody that can talk to them like one-to-one, we make them more comfortable to talk and to even listen to what is going on. And for that reason, I think during the recruitment process, during the aggressive recruitment process, we can include both students and PIs in the recruitment process, such that when we go to those institutions or those, I don't know, sometimes they do have like an annual meeting. So where they gather to talk about probably not science. So if we have to go there, we may have like some PIs and mostly students who may look like, who may look like them, so they can talk to them in a simple way. That way they feel. For me, coming from that background, I think it makes them to feel more comfortable and to really to be willing to listen to what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jewel.
Jose, I just building on his great suggestion. I wonder if you could talk about how the network could be leveraged, because if we're thinking specifically about Black scientists in physics of living systems, any one node may have a very small number of faculty, graduate students, postdocs. But could the network be leveraged for some of these recruiting efforts?
I think that's a very good point. If we could sort of create different groups, the underrepresented groups in the entire network, and they can share their experiences. So for example, if you're gonna have a Hispanic group or Native American or African American, but we can get these different people, since they're exposed, they come from the same background, but they're exposed to different institutions. They may be able to come and say what's good and bad from each institution. I think that's a very good idea. And then we can also use these people as a recruiting tool to do that. I think that the good point about your point also is, like I say, all these things require nucleation. Have enough people that actually can expose these people to the right experience, and maybe one node doesn't have it, but it may get nucleation by using the resource of all the networks. Margaret, that's a good area. I think that's a very good point that you have here.
Yeah, it's good. I'm writing it down.
Caitlin, now let's Caitlin talk. Do you have something to say?
Yes. Sorry, my internet won't allow me to have my video on right now and talk to y'all. But I think that it's important when we're talking about recruitment, whether it's to grad school or even from high school, but particularly thinking about into grad school, is if we have PIs or advisors, faculty who didn't take a straight traditional path to where they are. The ones who can understand the students who have had to take time off of their academic pursuits and come back to school later, the ones who have had to work through school or raise children through school. I think it's important to hear from people who have overcome those barriers on the other side and say, you know, look, I didn't have the best grades or the best GPA. You know, I had to divide my attentions. I had to do all of these other things, but you can still, you know, get your PhD. You can still get a degree in science. You can still pursue a career in science, and you'll find a place for you. Because I know I didn't have that coming up as a student, and it's only now towards the end of my graduate career that I see how many amazing scientists there are out there who had these similar meandering paths. And I think that's something that needs to be shared.
I think that's a very good point. I think we should add that. The other thing is, that's why I think the second topic we said about creating a list of undergrads and promote them to graduate school is very important, because we have a non-traditional way of recruiting people. And then after getting their experience, we can also use the network to promote them as they apply to grad school or jobs. So, and I think the idea of sharing experience is very, very important, because if you don't learn, how do people say, if you don't learn from history, you're going to repeat the errors, right? So it's very important to learn from what we have done.
Yeah, and Jose, I also think the PoLS institutes and in the physics frontier centers can help with also teaching of the science teachers for high school and junior high. I know my junior high science teacher was key for me wanting to go into science. And when we would have them here to University of Illinois, first time I was so dismayed how little science they really knew and loved, even by the modern topics. If there's anything we can do to...
We can do it. Margaret, why don't you say a little bit more? Because Margaret has been working with Eric Mazur between relating PoLS and PoLS-T. And I think that's an area you want to grow. So I think a very good point, Zen. There are lots of things that can come. There are lots of low-hanging fruits that we can do already with the resource we have.
Yeah, I think that Eric is actually gathering all of these network. I think that we can just use your information and grow the ecosystem. And I think one of the items that Dr. McNeese mentioned, I thought that was very interesting, that probably we can consider, is to have the PoLS graduate students or postdoc to teach at HBCUs for a quarter or semester as a way to nurture students or help students to get to research part. Because if you think about UH, and we have HTC that can help us, work with a lot of the students who wanted to get into this path, but it's a non-trivial work. And for the HBCUs, usually the professors are too overworked. I wonder if it's possible that a PoLS can have a cohort of students, I guess it had to be paid to teach, or guest teach, that somehow can mentor their students and help them, like how Jeff helped their students. And before they come to the summer program, at least they have some kind of preparedness before they start the projects. Okay. Is that possible? It seems so very expensive.
You have to think about it, but we should put it on the list. I have a couple people here from the young people. I think Kostub, do you want to speak now?
Yep. So I was wondering what everyone thought about, in addition to outreach activities, sort of introspective activities. So presumably, we're also through the PoLS network training future gatekeepers, and all of us come to graduate school with our own biases. And I grew up in India, and even though I've never experienced anything, I've still watched Hollywood movies. So I come with some preconceived notions that I'm not aware of always. So whether we can do some kind of implicit bias trainings through Zoom or through individual PoLS networks, or maybe even at the annual meetings where we break out into small groups, have someone facilitate a discussion, and at least become aware of our biases and then work towards overcoming them.
I think that's a very good point, and Charlene probably gave a good idea about getting these sort of different groups from different backgrounds around the network, and maybe having these different groups presenting for everybody about their own perspective would be a good idea. Maybe all these coupled together, I think maybe a interesting resource they can do. That's a good point.
Kareem also raised your hand.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a seed of an idea, but it comes from, I guess, like a broadly like recruitment type of thing. And like, it comes from the question, like, how can we make science viral? So in a sense, like, for example, I got into science from a YouTube video of watching The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene. And so while I was in high school. So the question is, like, you know, we have TikTok, Instagram, all these like routes of like social media. Is there like are there funds? Can we create like a social media engine that can produce content that attracts young people? It's like casting a broad net, and then, you know, like, of the people that come, like everything that we've been talking about, the systems that we've created will be there to greet them and help them figure out what they want to do. Because first you want to stimulate their imagination, and then once their imagination is stimulated in the context of science, then you have the institutionalized kind of like system ready to help them make their imagination like concrete. So that's kind of my question, or maybe my comment.
Thank you.
And since I've been managing the social media for PoLS, I'll just say that I love your idea. I think it'd be great, even what we do in the physics department, sometimes they will let the undergraduates take over the Instagram account. So it would be really cool to have something like that where each PoLS node sort of takes over the Instagram or takes over Twitter or something, and really gets their students involved.
But Charlene, for example, the meeting you organized last year on the educational meeting of PoLS, if we can sort of make those things produced a little bit more better and really put that virtually to people, that was an amazing meeting. I really sat on the back and learned so much about how presenting, how to do things. So I think these are ways that goes in that direction, right? We actually had some things you actually did organize that thing with Zen, and I think it's a kind of thing we can make it more popular.
I mean, and maybe this is like an idealization, but my kind of dream is to have a sort of like cosmos of the living systems, like show on TV, like kind of like having the, you know, like I think if we all come together and put our resources together, that would be something that we could all do that makes a big impact. Yeah, so that's.
Could I say something? This is Dave Thurmalay. When I was in IPST, which I still consider to be part of, we hired, thanks to the effort of one person, in fact, an African-American chemical engineer who was just fantastic, Michael Harris. And in the small building where we were, Arpita is still in that building. No, maybe she's not, I don't know. She's not. In the building, we saw huge number, a literally huge number of African-American students, postdocs, undergrads. Michael, for some personal reason, had to go back to his home state, and he took a job in Purdue, where he's an associate dean now of engineering, or at least he was the last time I checked. And then, like a phase transition, all these people disappeared. This was sort of alluded to by many people in this meeting. So the importance of role models, not advisors, as it were, is important. And even in this meeting, we saw Marta McNeese, we saw Sandra McGuire, and although she's not African-American, we saw Lee Limborg today with her experiences. And so once in a while, in our PoLS meeting, which we have, we could ask these people to come and talk to us. And in fact, you could also ask people like Michael Harris, the And ACS Jax just hired one of the associate editors, was a distinguished chemist, was an African American. So we can ask once in a while for them to talk about their experiences, how they are reaching out, and thereby expand the role model part of IPOLS and its various incarnations.
I agree. I think that if we really ask ourselves a question, does the IPOLS network represents the demographic of our undergraduate students or high school students? Probably there's a gap.
Yeah, this is Garrick Papoy, and I'd like to make a comment. Maybe it was discussed. I was teaching today in the morning. Maybe I missed some of that discussion. It's about HBCUs, but in terms of their graduate programs, there are some universities in our area. There's Howard University that have graduate programs, and the possibility of integrating them at the level of research collaborations. So instead of even in addition to recruiting students from there, or also directly engaging research groups in multi-PI research collaborations and grants. I wonder if that's an avenue that you guys have discussed, and whether it's worth pursuing that, at the level of graduate.
I think Margaret talked a little bit about it today, and I'm going to plagiarize her. Our interactions that we have had with basically the real success we have had with the University of Houston has been because people like Margaret and Greg, they also have been involved in the science of the center. So you're recruiting their students, but also there's the people from that institutions are involved in research with us. And I think the point you're trying to raise is very important, that basically that you feel that everybody's part of the effort, everybody feels ownership. You're not just trying to suck up people out of there and with no return. So I think the idea of having the full institution doing ownership, and we're trying to work and Margaret's trying to work a similar effort with the Houston community colleges. How can we actually integrate those people in a better way? And now we are having this effort with TSUs, with Texas Southern University. But I think the point is well taken. I think success in these programs or interactive institutions require the participation of everybody, and not just to sort of go and select a couple people, bring it to your place, and then close the door. I think that's a well-taken point, but takes a lot of energy. And that's something that PoLS has been discussing, and Margie has been involved on that. She knows how much energy it takes these things to get done.
And even integrate those groups into research grants and so on.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I think the key thing has to pay them. I mean, even if it's not co-I, but at least pay, because the teaching load at these minority serving institutes is really a lot. Yeah, if you wanted to, the one thing that at the CTPP is that CTPP pays the PIs, me and Greg, to involve in research, and that really makes a difference, because they allow me to not teach as much, so I can be engaged in research and also mentor students, and that take a lot of time as well.
And Margaret, maybe those are kind of things that you guys could put together as best practices document that other centers, not even biophysics, could.
So, for example, in most of the institutions, the faculty requires to teach summer courses in order to survive.
Yeah.
So you can come up with some mechanisms for summer salary. You can really have them at least more active, participate with you during the summer. That's why in the center we try to make sure everybody involved gets doing that, based part of the resource. But that's a best practice you can do, and I think that's something we can start to work with the research funding, so that people can actually come and be part of research, at least during the summer when they don't have the three-course load, and then we can avoid them, sort of stay out of teaching for that and be involved and coming together with the trainees to be part of the training during the summer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a win-win situation, right? Because that kind of alleviates her from intense teaching, and now most of our efforts can help bridge the gap between the PWIs and MSIs. Sorry, I use acronyms.
I wanted to maybe piggyback off of that last comment and say that I was hoping, out of this meeting and all these discussions, that the PoLS network, that we would be sort of a force for change and to compile best practices, in particular for funding agencies, to realize that, you know, if we're going to be, like you said, working with historically Black universities, that, you know, the collaboration needs to be funded in a way that makes it worth it also for them. And all of the other things that we've talked about. Is there a plan to sort of put together maybe something like your white paper you prepared last time, Margaret? Is there a plan to put something like that that we could send to NSF program officers or something?
Yeah, so one thing is about how to make this network, this synergy. I got lots of positive feedback. Can we go forward? How can we transfer this energy into something? Because usually asking like teachers to make extra effort, asking faculty from Minority Serving Institute or HBCUs do extra effort, that needs to have to pay their time. So Jose, do you think that this is something that we can actually have the percent to support something more of those?
I think we should break. You're putting a short report together, right? So I think it's very important that we divide into two parts. What we can do is the resource we have now. Okay? Can we use some of the money we have now to do some pilot programs? And then if these pilot programs work, then we can ask for additional funding afterwards. But we should break into two parts. And I think that's the way you can be more effective as you communicate with the NSF part, who has been very interested on that part.
Yes.
I think they're very interested, but I think if we can do a couple pilot programs where it sort of can scream from cutting from the top of what we have now, make these things work, then I think they'll be very receptive to a larger program afterwards.
Yeah, for example, like Arpita and I have discussed intensively about this. Some university, even though there's a node, but they are not as resourceful as a PFC center. So is there any way, like a supplement Arpita, do you wanted to talk more about?
Yeah, I mean, this was a question that I had also. And so just a couple of points that I wanted to make to this group. One is just a small actionable item. Could we have some sort of website where the resources that we heard about, you know, in the last 2 days could be put together? If I or someone else says, hey, we heard a great talk by this person, and there were all these resources they talked about, or, you know, what they do. So if we could we create some kind of PoLS network website where this information was shared? And the other question what Jose asked, what can be done?
Margie already had to do it, but we have to work with her to make
do that. Right. And the question is exactly, yeah, how, as Jose pointed out, like, how do we work, what can be done with the current resources and what can be done beyond? Because to have a sustainable effort, there's some sort of funding that is required, you know, to even pay summer stipend for the students, to get some administrative support. And I think this is a discussion that needs to be had. My other point that I just wanted to point out is, what can we do specifically as Physics of Living Systems Network? I feel that our outreach can be broad compared to other areas of physics, for example. Like, we've been working, some of us, with some aspects from our physics departments. But here I feel we can reach maybe a wider audience, you know, students who don't know that biophysics is part of physics. I mean, I think that a lot of times students don't even realize that in middle school or high school or even in undergraduate. So how can we leverage our unique capabilities in this interdisciplinary field to really broaden our outreach? I mean, that's just a question I have for the group. And we could, for example, share things that other nodes are doing in terms of modules and, you know, little projects and things like that.
So in that regard, we always, on every meeting and every action, we have a limited amount of resource, Margie knows better, for bringing students that don't belong to the network into our activities, right? So the question is, how can we better use that? This has been done in a kind of informal way, depending on people that apply and things like that, but we can formalize and be more aggressive on some direction we want to do about that. And then if we have a pilot program works on that, then we can sort of tell the funding agents, how can we amplify that program? But we do that on sort of with some concrete data in hand.
So I like to bring this attention to you, Jose, is that Dr. Lindbergh actually mentioned that there are research done at HBCUs. So the key is to have a joint collaborative research to send students to learn new techniques and then come back and collaborate. And I do want to point out that PoLS, one of the function of PoLS is indeed to do this. But now, as you said, a lot of the funding are used between PWIs. So something like what Jose mentioned, what can we do now is to open this resource opportunity to HBCUs. So HBCU students can come to PWIs and learn a technique or learn a computer program, and they can enhance collaborations between faculty this way. So whatever being done that is already happening in PWIs, we can extend that to HBCUs and MSIs. Would that be an all right suggestion, Dr. Lindbergh?
Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, I think I think the context is everything. So there may be HBCUs where people have absolutely no research going on, and I understand how that could happen. But that's not true of a lot of HBCUs. Certainly NSF has this whole program, HBCU Up, which funds investigators and HBCU-wide centers. And so I guess on behalf of my colleagues, I have been offended occasionally when national labs, for example, will reach out to our faculty and tell them what they should be working on when they already have a couple NSF grants and an NIH grant. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I know.
Yeah. So I think it's very different. There may be other faculty who would love to come spend the summer at a PWI and re-jump their research interests, but I think it has to be done in a context-specific way, and I think it requires, I just think it requires some thoughtfulness. Earlier, I was going to talk about the fact that when you were mentioning having students and postdocs teach at HBCU. So because Vanderbilt is so close, they have a postdoc program where 25% of a postdoc salary is to do some teaching at minority serving institutions, but 25% effort is not nearly enough for someone to teach a course. And I think all of you know this, it's no longer you go into a room and go wah, 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 wah for an hour and you leave. I mean, it's creating a lot of online tools and flipping the classroom, having discussion groups, having quizzes every day to help students get a sense of I'm getting it or I'm not getting it. And for postdocs with no teaching experience, this could deep six their postdoc productivity and screw them for the future, just like graduate students. So I think having them there is good. Taking the responsibility for teaching a course, that's a huge, huge time commitment. So I would suggest maybe they could, what we found works really well is they pop over and they're in the lab with students, because our labs are all question-oriented. I don't know if you call it that, but they're authentic research embedded into course-associated labs. So that, having a couple postdocs or a couple grad students in there talking with students, one, they're helping them, giving them more individual help, but they're developing some relationships. And doing that, not maybe for a whole semester when they'd have to be there 6 hours a week, but just popping in and out for certain lab experiments where they have a little expertise, maybe that would work. And then the last question I have is really, so I'm ignorant here, as you know, because I'm really a biochemist kind of person. But if the PoLS mission is for students in a physics background to gain more biological experience, like what are the important problems to solve, and then some strategies that are used in the bio community. Is there not a rich bio community associated with you that's non-physics and background? Because if you look at the diversity of people getting PhDs in the biological sciences, they're much more diverse, higher range of diversity. So that when someone said before, we have very few Black students, faculty, yes, but are your collaborating bio partners? Is there an opportunity there to enrich the diversity of your community? And when those bio people are out there at Abercams and SACNAS and these bio, you know, they might not be going to APS or BP, the Black Physicists Society meeting, but they might be going to ASBMB, cell biology, and there are very large minority graduate and postdoctoral programs there that are meeting. So I'm just wondering I'm just trying to figure out how bi-directional this PoLS is, right, PoLS. Is it physicists collaborating with biologists, or is it physicists training physics people bio so they can, you know, if it's really reciprocal, you might have a rich community there to diversify the PoLS group.
So,
well, in most of our minds, including the two chairs we have, this is very reciprocal. I think many of us look to the biology for the problems and might use the physics methods or physical chemistry methods, but I think we couldn't do it any other way. It's not a fiefdom we have created just to have fun without thinking about real problems.
But I think the problems are definitely reciprocal, but I think, as Dr. Limburg mentioned, having, and this is sort of what I was alluding to, that there is a lot of diversity in biology. And is there something we can partner with them to increase our outreach? And I don't think we do that, at least in a very overt way all of the time. So.
But Arpita, let me try to set, I think that's I really, thank you for your comment. That was fantastic. And I think it's good to have an outsider sort of pushing the insiders on what appears apparent when they look. When the postgraduate student network was created, every group involved in this network has a strong collaboration with the people in the life science they collaborate with. The reason network was created, that most of our students, although we collaborate with the life sciences, we all had students that came from physics departments. And these students felt very isolated. Although they interact with biology, they felt on their own physics community they're isolated. So the PoLS network, created by bringing these students that were officially in the physics department, collaborate with people in the life science, but they create a community of like, we came from physics, we are interested in life sciences, how can we bring a joint community? And that has been very successful. That doesn't replace the collaboration you're talking about. Our students go for all these other meetings also. But the PoLS meeting is sort of people that come from similar training to come together. That solves one problem. That is people with different training, but didn't solve the problem of how do we make this group. There are students interested in life science, they come from original physical training, how we make this group more diverse. And that's, I think, what comes. Now, your idea is very important, basically. We can use people from other communities to help to nucleate that into our community. I think that's a very good suggestion. There has not been problem not being explored sufficiently by us.
Maybe we can invite her to give a talk to the PoLS meeting, right?
Yes.
Margie can reach out to Dr. Limburg and ask her to give a talk to us.
Yes, definitely.
But thank you very much. That's a very good point. And I think it's this sort of these multiple relationships that can be synergized. They haven't been synergized. And I think that's a real refreshing point that you have raised for these people here?
Yes, it's been 14 years since the inception of PoLS, right?
Yes, PoLS starts small. We have been growing small. Now I think
Now we
have
can get to a point that interacting with biology community is possible now.
No, the interactions biology community exist, I think, but the question is, like Margie, I think, present well during her presentation, we have been trying to create a community of students in the physics department that are interested in problems in the life sciences, and to have these students to share their experiences. And that I think we achieve now. I think we are very mature network on that regard. So now I think we feel that we can address the question of diversity in a solid grounds. That has been done informally until now, but these things don't work informally. That's something we learn in life. These things require energy, require planning, and I think that's what it has been into the table for discussion.
So another point I wanted to mention, and I don't know if Kate O'Neill might, Kate and I were talking, and we were thinking, would it be possible to think about some sort of an undergraduate underrepresented minority conference that would be geared, basically focused on physics of living systems topics. It's just literally, we just didn't have a long conversation on it, but similar to the CU WIP or CU2 MIP that UMD and NIST do, I mean, that's all areas of physics. Is that something that we can start thinking about, where it would really bring topics of biophysics, physics of living systems, to the undergraduate, underrepresented minority community? And then there was a whole set of chats that were going on earlier in the Zoom chat about, there was some enthusiasm about social media and shows and these popular shows that are done for other areas in physics. So if something like that could be done to really bring physics of living systems out into the community.
Yeah, just to add to that, something that Arpita and I had talked about together was, so UMD has hosted the CU WIP and CU2 MIP conferences before, but what I know that UMD had to apply for that. So what if some of the different institutions within the PoLS network did the same thing? Then we could have some of the same programming, you know, across institutions to specifically highlight biophysics type research.
On the last few minutes, Margaret, you are trying to put a small white paper with all the discussion of the meeting. How do you want people to contribute, send their ideas to you as you put this together? Are you going to put something on Slack and then they comment, or you want them to email some stuff to you as you put all together? How do you want to proceed? How do things going to help you?
I think that'll be great. What I'm going to do is, and I wish you're going to put on Slack, and then I think there's lots of messages to put on chat here, but it's not going. I think that if you could kindly copy and paste and collecting some, put on Slack, that would be great. And I will create a channel. Is it a channel called Town Hall? No, I will create a channel called Town Hall. And please continue with that synchronously, okay?
Right, but we want to, in the end, to have something we can offer to the NSF for people like that. How are you going to get that from that channel and convert it to a small white paper? What's the plan here?
What I could do is that I can organize that into a Google Doc, and just like we did it for the white paper, and then we can have all the stakeholders to come and take a look at it, and given like 2 weeks period, and then the organizers and then the board of members can distill that into something that's more presentable.
And could we, so as Jose pointed out earlier, it would be really good to know, people's thoughts on what can be done without any additional funding at this point in time, and what can be done with additional funding and support, because all of these activities require personnel and funding.
I think
because everybody's got a full-time job already, right?
No, but the idea of sharing resources, create a network of all the students, all the minority students, so we can use that to project to graduate school. All these things can be done with the current resources. bringing high school teachers into some will require additional funds. So I think there are a few things that we can do, and we'll try to do that. That's very important that Margaret's going to write that together. I'll help her as I can. But it's very important that people go and comment on this Google Doc or Slack that she's doing so you get input from everybody else.
But even to recruit undergraduate students for research and collaborative research also requires funding. So I think it's important to point out, even to start something, it requires some amount of funding.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think definitely something can be done immediately and something can be done that requires money. I think every PI has their own things that they wanted to do. So I will just group it into two.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I think, how do we do about time?
We are on time now, unless someone has any additional comment.
Margaret, thank you for a fabulous job.
Thank you everyone for the
Margaret,
participation.
thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret.
Thank you,
Margaret.
so much. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, Margie and Kristan, and all the PIs of the notes to give all these ideas, and PoLS students volunteering your time and your dedication. Without you and participants, without you, it's not going to happen. And thank all of the speakers to give all these refreshing ideas. And Chris Barr is the evaluator, will send us a proposed survey. Please, please fill them up, because I often rely on these surveys to improve and then inform us what to do next. And I'll continue the asynchronous discussion on Slack. Okay.
Is a Slack URL made available, or you're gonna create?
Okay, let me do it now. So Dave, you will be here. Let me just copy. You can just click on it. I'm going to put it here. Dave, click on it, and you'll work. It's like a chat, so you can work on your smartphone, tablets, and computer.
Mm-hmm.
Emails, it's getting too difficult to manage when we have like 100 people, and then information get lost. And chat, at least all the information are categorized, and it's still there and searchable after you log out and log back in.
It'd be nice to have some channels maybe associated with the points that Jose spelled out at the beginning of this town hall.
Charlene, do you want to help me? Because
I'd be happy to
create
help.
a new channel for me. I think that this is all the members are having this privilege to create channels. I might miss a few items, even though I jotted down 15 of them. So just go ahead and create that. If I miss anything, it happened. Okay. Thank you so much. If not, I'll stay around for a little bit if you wanted to have some feedback. And otherwise, I'll look forward to hearing from you in a future meeting. Thank you so much.
Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the help.
Thank you.
I know everybody's awfully busy, and I really appreciate you being part of it during all these 2 days. Thank you.